Michael Abbott, please keep your computer on mute. Good evening, everyone. It's 6:28. We're going to wait a couple more minutes and we'll get started at 6:30.
Hello, all.
Mr. Massey?
Hi, Bob.
Do we have a quorum, Bob?
Yeah, just going to sit tight for another minute. And then once I do the roll call and quorum, before we get into any hearings, I just have a few things I want to set forth for those people unfamiliar with how we do these meetings on Zoom and how this is going to go tonight.
All right. The floor is yours.
Thank you, I think. So I believe we have everybody but Mr. Leffers. So Andrea is here, Tyler is here, Jim Patterson is here, Brent is here, Mike Gerhardt is here, Ashley is here, and Mr. Massey, you are here. So there is a quorum. There is nothing on the Waterfront Overlay District Development Plan Review. The next matter is a public hearing, which is a continuation of the April 26th meeting, where fortunately we had some technical difficulties and we weren't able to continue. So I will, for Mr. Ferrera's purposes, I will in a moment summarize what he wants to share with the board so we're not repeating. For those members of the public, if you have submitted an email or any other comments, those have been provided to the planning board members and are made part of the record. If you wish to speak tonight, request is that if you're going to say something other than what was in your email, that's fine. If you're going to repeat what's in your email, we're going to ask that you be super brief or not speak at all, because we have a fairly crowded agenda tonight, and in fairness to everyone, again, we want to keep things moving along. I don't want to prevent you from having an opportunity to speak, but if you've sent in something written, it's been read and it's in part of the record. So with that having been said, I want to. So with respect to the request for a dimensional variance, hopefully you can all see my screen. I just want to remind board members that what the requirements are for granting a variance, which is permitted under section 32-26 of our zoning ordinance. I'm going to just read this so every member of the public as well as the planning board has this information. In granting a variance, the zoning board of review shall require that evidence to the satisfaction of the following standards be entered into the record of the proceedings. A, that the hardship from which the applicant seeks relief is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure and not due to the general characteristics of the surrounding area, and is not due to a physical, why can't I read that? Applicant accepting there hereto those physical disabilities addressed in section 32-3P of this ordinance. And in such case, the relief granted shall remain in effect for only as long as the applicant maintains residency. That the hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant and does not result primarily from the desire of the applicant to realize greater financial gain. That the granting of the requested variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent or purpose of this zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan, and that the relief granted is the least relief necessary. With respect to this particular request for a dimensional variance under section 32-28, in granting a dimensional variance, the zoning board of review shall, in addition to the above general standards, require that the evidence be entered into the record of the proceedings showing that the hardship that will be suffered to the property if the dimensional variance is not granted shall amount to more than a mere inconvenience. This shall mean that there is no other reasonable alternative to enjoy a legally permitted beneficial use of the property. The profitability or the structure may be more valuable after the relief is granted should not be grounds for relief. The last sentence in this section of the ordinance does not apply to the particular request being asked for here. So if there's any questions from any board members with respect to that.
Hey,
Okay,
Bob, this is Ben.
Yep.
I don't have a question about the standards, but I just want to clarify before the applicant and the board begins discussion that this is a request for dimensional variance, as you just stated, in addition to an application for not an administrative subdivision. It's a minor subdivision because there'll be 2 lots created or proposed to be created. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Based on the ordinance as you've read it, Bob, there are 2 factors here I think that we need to consider. One is that the request for the variance is essentially for the benefit financially of the person who owns that property. So there's no, it goes against Section A. And I'm concerned too that there are any number of lots within this area that could be subdivided as this applicant is asking for, that would create an incredibly tight situation. I mean, frankly, the establishment of what constitutes a lot there is fairly open right now, and I don't want to close that loop by saying that people could subdivide lots within that area. And in this case, in particular, just for financial benefit. There's no indication that the person who owns the lot wants to live there. And essentially, this is being done for financial benefit. So from section B of the ordinance, I would say that we have a problem with accepting that.
Do any other board members have anything they would like to add to Mr. Massey's comments? Mr. Patterson, you unmute yourself.
I agree with the chair. I think that you would cause, as he suggested, the ability for several other owners in the area to be granted dimensional variance to subdivide their lots. I'm not sure that it would enhance the neighborhood, and I, for that reason, have a problem with it as well.
Mr. Gerhart?
So I took a ride through the neighborhood today, though, and there are a lot of 5,000 square foot lots as well. And while I understand the concern with other people taking similar actions, each case is individual. This doesn't set any precedent. And the nature of the neighborhood wouldn't be changed by the approval of this application.
Do any other board members have any comments? Mr. Dixon?
Yes, I agree with the chair and Mr. Patterson. I look at this as one of the fundamental purposes of zoning is to maintain a sense of consistency within a community. And our zoning ordinance requires us to not allow this type of variance where the primary objective is to just simply capitalize on the profitability based upon carving it into two new parcels. If we could do that, then we could theoretically carve up a lot of parcels in this town by just going through and trying to rework different things. It creates I think it would create a lot of problems. I mean, I actually live on a parcel that was originally two parcels that subsequently, in a similar type scenario where the zoning occurred after the development of the neighborhood. So the parcels don't necessarily match the original, like the way the zoning reads, but the understanding when we bought it and the understanding of the community is that these are single parcels and they now are codified as single parcels, but it would be kind of crazy in our neighborhood if people could come in and just buy larger lots and subdivide them into small little mini developments throughout the neighborhood. I just think that that's a precedent we want to avoid.
Mr. Bovine?
Thank you, Bob. I share the chair's specific concerns with regard to factor B and the financial gain issue, first and foremost, and then I do share concerns of the possibility for altering the general character of the neighborhood. I'll rest on that.
Thank you. Ashley?
I think the character of the neighborhood has to be excluded because the two parcels directly next to the parcel do not meet the zoning requirements. There's at least 6 others within the streets. And there was one parcel split in 2013, just a street over, that has less than dimensional. So I think we have to exclude that. However, I guess I would want to hear what is the hardship. And so that's kind of so we can't really go with the dimensions because there's a number of parcels that don't meet that requirement. However, I would wonder what is, that one section of the rules there might exclude us being able to do this at all.
Andrea?
I understand that the applicant was aware of what the zoning restrictions were at the time they bought the property. So I share I share Mr. Massey's concern, and that this does seem to be largely in pursuit of additional profitability on the property.
Okay, so there's two issues with respect to just full transparency. I mean, the subdivision, in addition to the dimensional request, would essentially create two lots that don't meet the lot coverage requirement, because they both be under 10,000 square feet. So, I mean, in essence, you're approving the dimensional variance and as well as creating two non-conforming lots. I mean, I appreciate Mr. Faria's interest in doing this. He grew up in the neighborhood. He shared that. His grandparents had a house across the street. His mom and aunt grew up there. But yeah, again, I think, the question that, before you is it's been articulated. Do you want to open that door? And once that door is open, we, as Mr. Dixon said, if we want to create housing opportunities, we can just go around town and just take every lot and subdivide it. But I want to give, if there are members of the public who have anything different to say than was communicated in their emails or letters, I will ask you to use the raise your hand icon and I will call on you.
All right, Bob, I would like to say, before the members of the public chime in, we have taken into consideration the information that was provided to us by the emails. I also took a drive through the neighborhood. We've looked at it from a GPS standpoint, in terms of the size of the lots that are currently existent there. And our goal here, I think now, is to say, does this meet the standards by which we would grant a variance? And quite frankly, I do not think that this particular application meets the standards by which we have to judge an application, beyond which I do not want to send a precedent for further development of this area based on this dimensional variance. So
Let me just check again. If you are from the public, you have something additional you want to add, you can use the raise your hand icon, which is on the lower part of your screen. Going once, going twice, not seeing any. Mr. Ferreira, is there anything that you would like to say in closing before the board considers your request? And if you would just unmute yourself.
No, thank you, board. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ferreira.
Hey, Bob, if I may, before the board considers a vote, I just want to make sure that the motion, whoever makes a motion in regards to these standards, that it's backed by the reason for either meeting or not meeting the standards, because if there's an appeal, that's what they're going to look at. For example, if I hear B talking about financial gain, it meets or does not meet the financial gain ask standard because the testimony of the applicant was X, Y, Z, that type of information.
Ben, I think A and B, those two elements within the ordinance were the factors which we were basing our decision on.
So you would just have to refer to those, whoever's making the motion.
So it would be A and B within the ordinance.
Well, refer to them, but then, why they don't meet or why they do meet the requirement.
Correct.
I mean, if your position is that you believe there is an economic gain, you need to state that specifically.
Yeah, well, okay, let me give it that a shot then. On point A, it's a matter of financial gain, and we see no purpose to that in terms of the value to the neighborhood or the town, other than to the owner of the property. So subdividing the lot in that manner would only be to the financial benefit of the applicant.
Does that suffice, Ben?
Based on the testimony from the applicant as to why he wants to subdivide it and what the purpose and what he's going to do on the extra lot, correct?
So if you would just add that, Mr. Massey, based on the testimony of the applicant.
Based on the testimony of the applicant relative to the property and subdividing it. Again, my sense is, I understand what he's trying to do, but within this neighborhood, were we to grant this, it would create a precedent. And quite frankly, it's we're not looking to increase the density of our housing in town.
Well, in some areas we are, but not perhaps in this area.
Well, at the expense of a neighborhood, I mean, this, there are at least 10 lots within a quarter of a mile of this particular lot that could be subdivided as such and would create a much more dense neighborhood, and there's absolutely no purpose to it.
Mr. Gerhardt, do you have something you want to add?
I'd ask the solicitor if this really sets a precedent, or is this every case is judged on its individual merits?
Correct. It does not set a precedent. Certainly, each application is looked at individually.
Thank you.
Mr. Massey, is there anything you want to add to the motion?
I would just say that I respectfully disagree. Anytime you make a decision through the planning board, you're setting a precedent, and it's much easier to appeal that from a legal sense anytime that particular application comes before us. So I would
Duly noted.
move forward with the motion that we deny this application.
Right, so there is a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Patterson signals that he will second it. I will do a roll call. Mr. Bovine,
Aye.
this is to deny the application.
I am in favor of denying the application.
Okay, Mr. Gerhardt,
No,
you're not in favor of denying the application.
no.
Ms. Medeiros,
Not either. I actually think this could,
okay. Mr. Patterson,
I'm in favor of denying the application.
Mr. Dixon,
I'm in favor of denying the application, but I thought we kind of jumped a little fast. Did we not want to mention that there is no hardship in the motion? I mean, because
Yeah, I would agree to that.
because I think that that's one of the key points, is that with the dimensional variance, there's a requirement that
Yes.
he not be able to reasonably enjoy use of the property under the current terms, and he can. There's
Yeah,
nothing
no,
restricting him
I
from
would
having
totally
current
agree with
use.
that.
so Mr. Massey's motion is amended to include reference that there is no hardship created by the failure to grant the dimensional relief, that he can still enjoy the property.
Correct. Correct.
Mr. Bovine, I'm going to start over again. Are you okay with the amendment?
I am in agreement with the amendment.
Mr. Gerhardt, I don't believe your position probably changed.
Nope.
Ms. Medeiros, your position probably has not changed. Mr. Patterson, I suspect your position has not changed.
Correct.
So Mr. Dixon,
I
you are
support the motion.
okay, and Ms. Giles
I agree with denying the application.
and Mr. Massey.
Yeah.
So we have 8 members present, 6 have voted to deny the application, 2 have voted to support the application. Ben, do we need any type of supermajority, or is that sufficient?
Oh, you need 5 out of 9 total membership.
Okay, Mr. Ferrer, we are sorry, but the application has been denied. Okay, moving along. The next matter is call to order. That was the close of the public, need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next matter is we'll come back to the minutes. Under old business, major land development preliminary final plan comprehensive permit application, AP lots 39 and 41, Main Street and Norbert Street. Applicant Huss Companies, owner Michael and Carol Riley. The applicants and their consultants and experts are here. I think it might be easier, Molly and EJ, if I share my screen, as opposed to Michael doing that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, let me just get it up first.
If you're able to start with the rendering document, that would be appreciated.
Okay, so why I am searching for that. Let me just say that, so there have been a number of, sorry. I mean, to the applicant's credit, they have responded to concerns and questions that have been raised at previous meetings with respect to the location of the units, some of the units, some of the concerns that I had with respect to stormwater have been addressed, and we appreciate that. I think we are at a point where this matter can move forward to preliminary and final approval. Let me just trying to multitask here, folks. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, while Mr. Rulli is doing that, so as Bob just talked about, he's talking about combining the preliminary and the final, and if the board believes that all the requirements are met for the preliminary and final, then there'll be a motion to combine the two together.
Correct. What that means is that this project would move forward expeditiously.
That means all the requirements are met in the opinion of this board.
Right.
Okay. Got a lot going on here. So I don't know, do you want to run through it, or do you want Michael or Molly? How do you want to do this?
Yeah, I could speak to, I'd just like to walk the board through the rendering. The other document, Bob, if you're able to bring that to the screen.
The elevations?
Yeah, it says rendering binder. I think you have it open just to the left of that one.
Yeah. It's simply a matter of figuring out how to do this.
At the top.
Yeah, I can't do two at one time, so. I know what I need to do, so hang on. And go back here. There, and there we go.
We put on,
Okay.
all right,
So
cool.
good evening to the board again, and thank
Wow.
you to Mr. Rulli. I just wanted to briefly walk you through some renderings that we had completed by an artist
All right.
to illustrate some of the views of the building. This first one is units 1 through 4. This is essentially a view from the corner of Main Street and Norbert. We chose some historic colors, and these may not be the final colors, but we wanted to illustrate a couple different options to the board, really illustrate the look and feel of the corner units here. You can see on the ground floor there, we would have the potential artists studios, and then the residential units above that would be sort of contiguous with units 1 and 2, and also 3 and 4 moving up Nobert Street. We have some landscaping along the sidewalk and nice presentation for that corner lot. If you're able to scroll down to the next rendering, these units are on Nobert Street, and these were the units that we had a discussion with the Historical Commission about. And we were actually able to address some of their concerns regarding the cars in the driveway. I think it was Mr. Massey that had made the suggestion as well in our discussions. We were actually able to move those buildings a little bit closer to Nobert Street to sort of address their concerns and not allow a car in that driveway. So everything would be in the garage, and we'd sort of maintain, the streetscape concerns that the Historical Commission had raised. Again, this is just an example of keeping all of the units the same color. We do like some variation in the color, and some of the next renderings will show that. This rendering is actually inside the courtyard. So in the rear parcel, once you would turn into the courtyard, this would be the appearance of units. 9 and 10, which are duplexes. This is 11, 12, and 13. And then another duplex, 14 and 15, within that courtyard. So we envision, a brick pavers along the walkway around the courtyard, and then a permeable pavers in the center. And then the last rendering is just simply the aerial shot of the courtyard, showing those units 5, 6, 7, and 8, the quadplex a little bit closer to the road, again, to address the Historical Commission's concerns. And I think this also does a good job at illustrating some of the green space that we'll have around the perimeter of the property, and our 2 parklets at the bottom left and right, with some larger landscape trees and patios for use by the residents. After the renderings, Michael Abbott is with us this evening, in addition to Molly Titus from Depreet. And as Bob had mentioned, we've submitted information on the stormwater and the sewer tie-ins. And if anyone has any other questions about architecture, design, or layout, Michael Abbott could answer those questions along with myself. And then any engineering questions related to utilities or civil plans, Molly is available. But at this time, we're respectfully requesting preliminary and final approval for this project.
Well, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. We've seen this project through a good deal of time and effort, and you've been very receptive to our concerns and to those of other town boards. This is a project that is well thought out and also meets the affordable housing ordinance upon which you're applying. I'm assuming that's part of this. So I have no questions. I'll leave it up to the rest of the board. Thank
Mr.
you.
Gerhart, any questions?
No, but I will move that we combine preliminary and final approval.
Is there a second to the motion to combine?
Second,
Ms. Giles, second, several seconds. Just a show of hands for all in favor of combining. It seems unanimous, so they are combined. No other questions, Mr. Gerhart?
No?
Ms. Giles, any questions?
No.
Sounded like a muted no. Ms. Medeiros? Mr. Patterson,
None.
Mr. Dixon,
No.
Mr. Bobine,
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Massey.
Nope.
Are there any members of the public that are here that would like to comment on any aspect of the application? If so, I would ask you to use the raise your hand icon and I will identify you and allow you to speak. And I am seeing none. Ben, if you could, I know we sent out an email last week summarizing the findings of fact required to approve this under the comprehensive permit. The conditions that I would suggest be added is that, and again, Mr. Lanny mentioned it, you know, we are working together with respect to finalizing what the sanitary sewer connection is going to be in Norbert Street. And DePreet has provided us with their stormwater plan. We are continuing to review those. So I would say that any approval is contingent on my office and wastewater treatment folks and DPW signing off on those plans. But given the level of cooperation we've had to date, I have no reason to believe that that won't continue, but I do think it should be a part of the condition of any approval that we reach satisfactory agreement on that. In addition to any other conditions that board members want to put on the approval. So Ben, if you could just summarize the findings of fact that they need in order to.
So based on the testimony and evidence presented by the application in this hearing and previous hearings, that this board finds the proposed development is consistent with local needs as identified in the local comp plan, with particular emphasis on the community's affordable housing plan. The proposed development is in compliance with the standards of provision of the town's ordinances and subdivision regulations. All low and moderate income housing units proposed are integrated throughout the development and are compatible in scale and architectural style to the market rate units within the project, and will be built and occupied prior to or simultaneous with the construction and occupancy of any market rate units. There will be no significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed development as shown on the final plan with all required conditions of approval. There'll be no significant negative impacts on the health and safety of current or future residents of the community in areas including but not limited to safe circulation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, provision of emergency services, sewage disposal, availability of potable water, adequate surface water runoff, and the preservation of natural, historical, or cultural features that contribute to the attractiveness of the community. And finally, all proposed land developments and subdivisions will have adequate and permanent physical access to a public street, and the development will not result in the creation of an individual lot with any physical constraints to development. That buildings on those lots, according to pertinent regulations and building standards, would be impractical.
So if somebody wanted to make that motion, as we will cut and paste what Mr. Ferreira had said into the decision.
Within the structure that you had suggested, Bob, the review by your office of the sewage treatment and water availability of the.
Stormwater, yep. Yeah, so I would say that in the decision, the motion will reflect the language that Ben just recited, as well as the approval of the sanitary sewer connections, as well as approval of the stormwater management plan. That will be incorporated. So that would be the motion.
And Bob, also just
So moved.
all approvals, local, state, and federal approvals, just in case.
Yep, and
Right.
all
So
applicable.
moved.
Okay, so
Just a quick question. As per your concerns about plantings and all that, just by them having submitted that plan, are they compelled to put the planting in as we understand it that they've submitted?
that can be a condition that, I mean, that is not the final landscape plan, I don't believe, but I mean, I think that, you know, if you want to add a condition that, you know, as depicted on the renderings, there's an expectation that there's going to be a certain amount of green space, that's appropriate.
Absolutely. Let's go for that.
So, Mr. Lanny, are you okay with that? So again, the cut and paste motion will include everything we've just discussed. So we'll try again is there a motion to grant both preliminary and final approval to the comprehensive permit as submitted?
So
Mr.
moved.
Mr. Gerhart makes the motion. Is there a second? Second
Second.
by Mr. Massey. Do the roll call. Mr. Gerhart,
Yes,
Ms. Giles,
enthusiastically.
Yes,
Ms. Maderas,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes,
Mr. Massey,
Yeah,
Mr. Bovine,
Yes,
and Mr. Dixon.
Yes.
Did I do Ms. Maderas? Maybe I'll do her twice, so we have 9 votes.
Yes, twice, 3
That's good.
times, whatever you need.
So,
often and vote early.
so I just want to say thank you to Mr. Lanny and his team. They've been delightful to work with, and I appreciate the professionalism. And I appreciate the support from the planning board for projects like this. I think we're going to start to see more of these, and I think this serves many purposes for us in terms of providing workforce housing, as well as filling in some of the open spaces on Main Street. So congratulations and thank you. I do know Mr. Leffers came to the meeting late, but did not hear any of the testimony that was given tonight. So that's why I did not call on him to vote.
All right, I would like to say thank you very much, Bob. Your leadership in this town's planning has been extraordinary, and your support of, positive movements within the planning have been extraordinary. And I want to congratulate you on your professionalism. And as a personal note, you're a nice guy too.
Still have a job, right?
they're related.
It feels like this is my last day. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
those kind words, Mr. Massey. I'm glad to see the check cleared. That's good. All right, moving ahead, major land development.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So moving ahead, major land development, AP 15A, lots 281, 282, 665 Metacom Avenue. Owner Denise O'Brien, RET, applicant Michael O'Brien. I know Mr. D'Amico and Mr. O'Brien are here. I'm going to go through this exercise again of trying to teach myself how to share the screen. So Mr. D'Amico, if you'd like to just summarize what's happened since the last time we were all together, why I search for your document, that would be wonderful.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bob. Good evening, board members. For the record, my name is David D'Amico, and I am the principal of D'Amico Engineering Technologies with offices at 2080 Mineral Spring Avenue in North Providence. And that is where I sit this evening, though I wish I was with you all. So we had a very comprehensive meeting last time, and it essentially sent us back to the drawing board to make some revisions to the layout, specifically in the area where we went over, because as you know, our design is in our proposal is primarily in the Zone B location that is on the Metacom Ave frontage portion of the site. And in the regulations, it does allow us to go 30 feet over that line with parking. So our last proposal had, I was into that quite a bit more than that. So we were able to reduce that and get it within the 30 feet. We also moved the dumpster enclosure away from the building setback, which was to the north. That is now at the terminus of the parking area. As we have gone forward, an idea that Mr. O'Brien wanted to do to make his development a little bit more attractive and a little bit unique. He wanted to offer that would be part of certain units, garages. And that is the other structure you see in the parking area. So those would be parking garages for whatever he designates, whatever unit that would go with that parking. There would be 6 bays in there, and they would have to use that parking as you know, as required. We have 1 extra space based on our parking zoning requirements. So that was, I would say, the major revision to the plan. One of the other items that came up, and you know, we always knew this was there. It is at a master plan level, so we don't always go out and do soil evaluations, but we did do, based on comments and from the public that there was high groundwater, we did go out and do several test holes and on the site. And I think as predicted, as everyone, I think most of the board had predicted, the groundwater elevation on this particular lot, and I believe the area is relatively shallow. We had mostly 18-inch readings on the site. So, and they got worse as you got back further to the west. So, and definitely a result of essentially the surrounding area really kind of built up around this this property. If you go into the property, you drop off right off the bat, you drop off at least 3 to 4 feet from Metacom Ave, and then it gently gets deeper as you go to the back. Now, the property to the south, that's all higher than this property. The property to the north is slightly higher than this property. And the property to the west and east, Metacom Ave is above this property. And the property to the west is pretty level. Matter of fact, it's even a little higher than our property. And essentially drainage, if you look at the drainage patterns, and we went in there and did that, it actually, any flow actually flows to the north in that, kind of where the north arrow is. That's really the lowest area of the site, and it kind of flows out towards that area there. Yes, right in that area. So kind of interesting the way this land ended up, you know, being one of the last developed along this particular stretch. So what our feeling was, you know, and I think it was, you know, we kind of knew this from the beginning. We had proposed a permeable pavement system. So what happens is with the groundwater, you know, at 18 inches, that's really shallow. And in order to get a drainage system, you would not be able to use any type of subsurface system. Or even if you were to go with like bioretention or a sand filter in the back, you would still need your certain clearances, which are around 3 feet from the bottom of the system to the groundwater elevation for that to to be able to be permitted. There are some exceptions. DM does allow us to modify that if we mitigate that. If we wanted to go, 2 feet separation, it's possible our mitigation would be to add another foot of sand underneath for additional filtration. So those are called technical justifications that we need. Now, in this particular case, if we go with the permeable pavement system, we can get the bottom of the system above the 3-foot separation. And the reason why is because we really don't want this site lower than Metacom Avenue. All right, we want to kind of get this site up a foot or 2 foot, essentially above the back edge of sidewalk. It's right at the back edge of sidewalk, which drops off in this area. So that's what we want to do. So this drainage system that we have here lends itself well to having a shallow groundwater elevation through this site. And of course, we would keep the bottom floor of the unit a foot above that elevation, which would not be an issue here. So that was one big item. And then there was, we did need to do a landscape plan. We do have that, but before, Bob, you go on to that, if you could go back one to the site plan, you did ask, someone did mention traffic. One of the residents did mention that. And of course, I've personally have done a couple of traffic studies for this particular building in other parts of the state. And so trip generation from this is essentially pretty light. And I can give the board, Bob wanted at least for me to give the board what we were looking at for trip generation from this. So essentially using our IT manual, the 10th edition, 2016 reference guide, all the traffic engineers would use this. We can attribute 13 trips total in the peak hour. Now we're always looking at the peak hour, which generally I would suspect, we haven't done counts on Metacom Ave, but I would suspect, like most other roadways, Metacom Ave peaks between probably 7:30 and 8:30. And that can adjust each road by 15 minutes to a half hour. And then in the evening, we have 17 trips entering and leaving. In the morning, it would actually be 11 trips leaving in the peak hour and 3 coming into the property. Now, as you can see, that's really light. This is a DOT roadway. We would need a physical alteration permit for this curb cut. And I can tell you, I would not need to do a traffic study for this, again, because we really don't meet the criteria for that for DOT. Usually it's around 100 trips in the peak hour that trigger that. And we're, as you can hear, only a fraction of that number. So that kind of goes there and addresses that. And then we could just go to the landscape plan. And we hired Diane Sewell, who is a landscape architect. And she has worked on these projects before. And this is her rendition of knowing these buildings. This is her rendition of landscaping for this site. She was pretty aggressive, you could see, with her buffers on both sides, the north and the south. And then, of course, a nice landscape bed in the front of the building, right in front, with larger trees or autumn type trees. And then, of course, we might aggressively plants around the building in the beds, and that's what she did here. And it really does reflect what Mike has done in the past on his other projects. And we have what we'll call a preliminary landscape plan for you all to review.
Okay,
Mr. D'Amico, that is perhaps the most professional presentation we've had before the planning board. You've answered all of our concerns earlier on, and I'm impressed by your professionalism. The one thing that I would ask is that if we were to make a motion to approve this, which I would recommend, that we make this subject to the zoning regulations that we had discussed with Ben earlier, in terms of buffer zones and landscaped areas.
so just to be clear, what you'd be approving tonight is simply the master plan. It would still need to have one additional hearing at least for preliminary and final plan approval.
I think, yeah, the last one we did was master and preliminary, correct?
The last one that the main Nobert was preliminary final. This is master plan right now.
Right.
So we would need at least one more hearing for, if you wanted to combine preliminary and final for this at the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, I would go for that.
Mr. Chair, I also believe this applicant has to go before the zoning board, maybe for a special use permit. So that will also be discussed in terms of the green area and what you're talking about with, the trees, the landscape.
Okay.
So do any other board members have any questions for the applicant, Mr. Gerhart?
So I just want to make sure that we know what's going to happen to Mr. Healy's house. Is there a commitment to renovate that? And then is there a plan that what will happen to it after it seeks being a rental office?
Mr. D'Amico, do you want to address that, or Mr. O'Brien?
Well, I would like to have the owner and an applicant address that.
So my name is Michael Bryan. As you all know, I'm developing this property. So my primary use for that is to completely renovate it inside and out. I'd like to increase the window sizes a little bit for better exposure. And it's going to be primarily used as a rental office and a management office for the property. So when people want to come in and express their concerns for maintenance or whatever issues, as well as a place to pay their rent. And also it gives me an opportunity for people to notice the office. So it gives me better visibility for potential tenants.
Thank you.
Great.
But I definitely want to keep the property. I think it's a nice, it has a little historical twist to it.
Bit of history.
Although lately a little
Given some
dark.
of the emerging headlines, you may not want to keep it.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's true. That's true. But
Just saying.
Just might want to lose that.
but it is a nice old home that I'd like to use as an office. It's not very
Yeah,
big.
no,
So
that makes sense. It
I have no
definitely
interest in renting it as an apartment. I don't have any interest in that. I think it would be a great amenity for me and the residents to have a place to have a management office.
does. For
And
sure.
mean, right on Metacom Avenue, it's a perfect scenario.
If you find any kind of billing records in there, that would be helpful. Ms. Giles, any questions?
Well, I have a question for you, Bob, really. I mean, so did that presentation address your concerns about drainage?
Yeah, I mean, we know from other areas that are to the northwest of this site that, we have a high water table, we have drainage issues. As it goes away from the site to the northwest, it tends to be going towards the Palmer River, towards the Warren River versus the Kickamuit. And that's just there are areas not that far from here that are actually designated as being in the flood hazard zone, even though they're at a high elevation. I mean, that's just the geography. So I think, the concern that some of the abutting property owners in Bristol had was their fear that the water was going to go to the southwest, when in fact it's going to go to the northwest, which would take it away from those properties. I think there's enough undeveloped land in the rear to kind of absorb anything that's beyond the BMPs or advanced.
This will, Bob,
water
though, impact further development in that area. Because
Potentially,
I think there was a proposal for a second development behind this. And that is something I think we'll have to take a very close look at, because given the amount of runoff, it seems like that particular area is going to be very wet.
And Mr. D'Amico probably acknowledges that they're aware of that now.
Yeah.
Correct. It definitely will be a challenge. We would ideally, when we heard that, the abutters here had, they were experiencing wet cellars and whatnot. Obviously, went into the neighborhood in the back. I think it's Gay Street or Guy Street. And, those, they constructed in, if we have 1.5 feet of, groundwater depth, those foundations are well into that water table back there. And, that's just an existing condition that, we're not going to exacerbate.
And I think that's what the board wants to be clear, that you're not further
that's
contributing
the
to.
factor. It's not what came before.
Okay, Ms. Maderas, any questions or comments?
No, I'm all set.
Mr. Dixon,
I'm
Mr.
fine.
Bobine,
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Massey, anything else?
Motion to approve the.
No, I gotta get to Mr. Patterson as well.
Oh, sorry.
No questions.
All right, so then is there a motion to approve the master plan as submitted? And hopefully, Mr. D'Amico, Mr. O'Brien, Ben,
Yeah, I have-
Within the conditions of the ordinance that Ben and you and I discussed.
yes, another cut and paste in the decision.
That- Good with you, Ben?
Sure, yes.
Okay,
I'll do-
so
I'll do the
is
findings.
Mr. Massey's at a motion?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone has voted in the affirmative. So Mr. D'Amico, you have your master plan approval. And if in fact we tie everything up at the June meeting, we could combine the preliminary and final approval.
Just make this clear that this is a conditional approval, meaning if they don't get the special use permit and zoning, it's dead.
Correct.
Correct.
Come back.
Understood. I think our next step is to get the application into zoning, and then we do have a state approval. I would suspect you'd want at least a submission to DOT and
I mean,
potentially.
for the PAP, yes. I mean, again, I'm not concerned with the traffic. I mean, we've got a Dunkin' Donuts 100 yards down the street that causes all kinds of problems. That road goes from 4 lanes to 3 lanes in front of your property. I mean, the frustration that the residential neighborhood in Bristol has coming out. I mean, they're going to have that frustration whether this project goes through or not. So, yep. Okay, thank you very much.
Once again, I'd like to say, Mr. D'Amico, thank you for a most professional presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Massey. We don't get that recognition, Austin, and I'll take it. Believe me. Thank you very much.
Base. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, board members.
We're full of hugs and kisses this week.
Yeah.
Everyone gets a hug and a kiss.
I'm not used to that, honest to God. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox, you are up with the.
There was no second on that.
Thank you, Rhonda. Was it a second to? Yeah, there was. We voted on it.
I don't think we did a roll call.
All right, we'll do this again. The motion was made by Mr. Massey, and with the conditions that Ben had set forth, second by Mr. Patterson. So Mr. Gerhart,
Yes.
Ms. Giles,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Ms. Maderis,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mr. Bobine,
Yes.
and Mr. Massey.
Yes.
So
Aye.
Mr. D'Amico, it's deja vu all over again. It's still, and Mr. Leffers, I'm sorry, Mr. Leffers. There you go. All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox, you are up under new business. This is site plan review, AP 21, lot 77, 8 Palmer Avenue, Humberto and Olivia Rigo owners. AP 21, lot 83, 290 Market Street, Milton Costa Landscaping LLC owner. While I look for the site plan, Mr. Cox, I will let you summarize the basis of the application.
Thank you. And if I seem anxious, apologize. I'm pending between you, this board, and the Bristol Zoning Board. And I was up last on both agendas, and they're getting very close. I have other people, hopefully that'll hold them for me. Anyway.
Blast through this, Bruce.
Pardon me?
We'll blast through this.
Well, this is started off as a special use application by the Costas. They have a landscaping business in this village overlay district that is a perfect fit for the location. It's backs up against the gas station. It's next across from a veterinarian office. The road that they're on actually has a metal shop and whatnot. They've been in business. They bought this site when they were told that, yes, you can do have your home in front and your landscaping in back. It's perfect. It's village overlay. Nobody's mentioned to them that needed a special use permit. So then they had started the application before a survey had been done. So we then go back and get a survey, and we discover that, well, wait a minute, Mr. Costa, unbeknownst to his wife and to myself, was renting a part of this property from the Regos. So the Regos have filed an application for permission to continue renting a portion of their property to the Costas. And I've added to our application a dimensional relief because we have 13,500 square feet where 15,000 is needed. So, to make the record complete for the zoning board, we needed to have that dimensional variance request as well. It is literally a perfect fit. They operated there for a few years without anybody complaining. Then there's a personality conflict between the Costas and the vet to the south, but that's been resolved. There's some parking issues, and that's not an issue. It's some gentlemen were using unused parking spaces at the vets, and that's not going to happen. It hasn't happened in the last year and a half that this has been going through. It sort of trundled along because there was some question about would the Costas want to buy part of the Regos property or not, which would mean an administrative subdivision, and obviously the joys of COVID haven't made life any easier. So that's the gist of where this is. This is a perfect fit for this location. The zoning board needs your input for, that element of it, quite honestly.
Thank you very much.
Any questions from members of the board? Mr. Gerhart?
So exactly what's being requested as advice from us to the dimensional variance for the house
No,
for the special use for the rear portion of the lot.
it comes to you for the special use element of it. And obviously you can take the dimensional request into consideration, but it comes to you because the special use permit allowed in the village overlay district requires an input from the planning board. Yes, this basically fits. We think
Is it village business or is it rural business?
rural business.
Rural business.
My
That's right.
apologies. Rural,
And they'll
rural
continue to use it for the same, I drove by today, it's equipment storage and other things like that.
That's
It's
correct.
just to make the existing use legal.
That's right.
Thank you.
The Costas actually live in the house, and you can see if you looked at their landscaped yard, and if you
Very nice.
drive around Bristol, you see the name Milton Costa quite often. He's a very good hardscape landscape artist.
Ms. Giles, anything? No. Mr.
No.
Patterson,
No questions.
Ms. Maderas,
What else are you supposed to put in a rural business district? Whatever
well, you
that
could do miniature golf.
means, right?
How's bite? By the
Sounds
way.
rural to me.
Mr. Bovine,
Got nothing, thank you.
Mr. Dixon.
I agree with Ashley.
Okay, well, we'll leave the cynicism aside for a moment. Mr. Massey?
I make a motion that we
No,
approve.
then we got to get to Mr. Luffers too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No questions.
Okay, Mr. Massey.
I make a motion that we approve this.
So the motion would be to give a favorable recommendation for the site
the
plan to
zoning
the
board.
zoning board.
Correct.
And so is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Gerhart seconds. Mr. Dixon,
Yes,
Mr. Massey,
Aye.
Mr. Leffers,
Yes.
Ms. Maderas,
Yes.
Mr. Bovine,
Aye.
Mr. Gerhart,
Yes.
and Ms. Giles.
Yes.
So, Mr. Cox, I just want to keep you for another 45 minutes or so, just so you
Thanks to the miracle of Zoom,
disrespect the people in Bristol.
texting
Oh, don't do
on the
that.
Bristol site, watching that go on and going, who's
Yeah.
going to come first? So
I just hope you appreciate the fact we're significantly more efficient than they are.
you have been extremely seasoned. I'm going to jump over to the Bristol zoning. Good idea.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, the next matter is under the administrative officer report I have sent out previously. We are doing a public webinar with Fuss and O'Neill and their coastal resiliency or the resiliency officer on the 12th of May, next Wednesday, on the market to Medicom plan that we have. We're required to do 3 public meetings as part of the SNEP grant. So we have a website set up just for that project now. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I encourage you to do that. I appreciate the fact that you've been putting in a lot of time at meetings. If you're not able to make the webinar, I understand that, but I just wanted you to be aware that we were going to be doing that. The last thing is, and I've sent something to the chair of both the planning board as well as the zoning board. The town manager and the council president are supporting my request to establish a parking management study committee, primarily initially to look at parking in the downtown area. That would be Main Street, the cross streets, and Water Street. I'm looking for 2 members of the planning board, 2 members of the zoning board. There'll be members of the business community, hospitality, restaurants, as well as some residents to participate in that. I'm not going to ask for anybody to volunteer tonight. I am just going to ask if it's something you are interested in participating in, that you communicate that to the chair and he will advise me. You know, the good news is we've got a lot going on in Warren. The bad news is people think it creates a lot of traffic. So, I mean, and, you know, I've said it often, I will continue to say it. We don't have a parking problem. We have a parking management problem. We have, you know, in excess of 1,000 parking spaces available in the downtown area. It's just a matter of how they're accessed and how we do that. So, you know, there's a number of creative ideas that I have, but I'm looking for input from other people as well. So if it's something you're interested in and want to participate in it, I just ask that you communicate that with Mr. Massey. My goal is to convene that group in the next few weeks because with the warm weather and everything going on, something we need to get to quickly.
And I'd second Bob's proposal. This is parking in Warren has been a problem for a long time, and how areas are designated for parking and not parking is something that needs to be addressed downtown, as well as in some of the suburban streets, like we're seeing in Norbert Avenue. That's a street that should have no parking on it. If you wanted to get an ambulance down that street in a given day, you couldn't. The concept of, what is available parking and what is, public parking needs to be addressed in this town. So thank you, Bob.
Yep. So I just want to say kudos to this board. I mean, I've been serving as the lead on the zoning board, and if we had an agenda like this on zoning, we would probably be halfway through the first application right now. So the fact that we are through the agenda, is there anything any board members want to raise? If not, then a motion to adjourn would be appropriate, and you would have a whole lot of gratitude from
moved.
me.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good work tonight. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Bob.